Thank you, Dennis. My name is David G. I am a grateful recovering alcoholic. I'm also a grateful recovering lustaholic. I have a recovery date in both programs, AA of August 8th, 1994, SA of October 1st, 2019. I'm really grateful to come out each week and do this with you guys. This work, as it's been given to me, as laid out in the big book. We have been doing this about 17 weeks now, I think. We've been moving through the big book, taking a close, in-depth look at this work. We have made it all the way up to amends, assuming that we have worked up to this point in the book the way that we've outlined it, then, by now we're starting to recover, not just be sober, but recover. And last week we looked at steps 5, 6, 7, and we took a peek into step 8 as outlined in the big book, Alcoholics Anonymous. This week we're going to pick up on page 76, and I'm going to back up, and I want to look at step 7 as it's outlined here in the big book as well, and we'll drop down into steps 8, and we will definitely go into steps 9 today and begin to look at the directions as outlined in the big book. And coming through this work of the big book was not my first time to do that, but it was my first time that I ever made it to amends and really begin to do what the book said. I'd found myself in a really bad place. Toward the end of September of 2019, I'd bottomed out with lust, and I was in a bad way. This was not my first experience with SA, but it was definitely the first one where I had the willingness to go to absolutely any length. Now, at that time, I'd been coming back through the process of the work with a man, and he had got me to amends when this all took place, actually. So rather than backing away in shame and guilt, I had to stand up and face this deal for the first time in my life. I came through, I've made all of my amends except one amends. There is one amends that is left undone. I'm kind of torn about that amends some. I have talked to another member who has been through this work that I respect very dearly in one of the fellowships that I attend. He has given me a different look at some things to look at, and, that one amends, I'm just not quite settled with it in my heart yet. We'll look at that as we move through this work, and I'll be more than happy to share that with you. I don't have anything to hide today. I'm completely transparent, and I'll be happy to share that with you when we get to that point in the book. So let's start right here on page 76 today. We will start with the 7th step prayer when it says, when ready. It's about the second paragraph here on page 76, and it says this: when ready, we say something like this. How do I know when I'm ready? That was my question for so many years. The 6th step prayer just before this is, if we cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing. And when I feel at peace with that, then I feel like I'm ready to say something like this. And here's our prayer. God, I am now willing that you should have all of me, the good and the bad. And see, I never really considered God having the good, only the bad. My idea of what good is and God's idea of what good is seems to be two different things. One of the things that I was told here, that I need to have any judgment either way, good or bad. He says, I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. And there was something else that I had not considered. I had not considered that he would take away the ones that stood in the way. I felt like God would take all of my defects of character. And there again, I had not done the work. I had not looked at the directions very closely. It does not say that at all. It says that he will remove the ones that stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellow. Now, there are certain character defects that I have today that is still a way that I can use those to help my fellow man, and I've found quite a few of those. He says, grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. And we talked a little bit about this last week. If you'll hold your place right there, and you'll come back with me to page 63 for just a second. When we took the 3rd step, in other words, whenever we made a covenant with God, we took this step. We looked at this a few weeks ago as we was coming through this part of the book. The 3rd step prayer is in the middle of the page where it says, God, I offer myself to thee. But as you read the prayer, you get down to the end of the prayer, you notice there is no amen. So in the spiritual world, my sponsor told me that anytime you close out a prayer, you always close it out with amen. So we did not close out in prayer. If you'll notice, as we come through the work in steps 4, steps 5, step 6, and we just did that prayer on 7, we were still in prayer. It was prayer and action, prayer and action. We were still in prayer, so it was not closed out. But here on page 76, after we've read the seventh step, the word amen appears. So it tells me at that point, the prayer work that I have done between 3 and 7 is now done. We have then completed step 7. But now we need more action, with which we find that faith without works is dead. We look at steps 8 and 9. We have a list of all persons we have harmed to whom we were willing to make amends. We made it when we took inventory. Very, very direct statement there that I missed for a long, long time. We made it when we took inventory. I can remember my sponsor had to go away for a family emergency for a little while in the early days before I really found this process of the work. But I had written inventory, and when I got up to this point, after he got back, he told me, he said, bring your inventory and come over. We want to sit down. We want to take a look at your 8-step list. And I said, oh, man, I can't do that. And he said, why not? And I said, because I burnt the inventory. And he said, why? Why would you burn the inventory? Well, I'd heard it in meetings that, after you do the 5th step, that you should get rid of the inventory. So at this point, I'm still listening to what I hear in the fellowship more than what I'm seeing inside of the book. And I had never seen this before. Very good lesson for me. I guarantee you I've not burnt an inventory at this point ever again after that. So we have the inventory, we have it in hand. We have the list in hand. We made it when we took inventory. So after I finished the 5th step, and I took an hour and I reviewed what I'd done in step 5, I looked at the few questions in step 6 at the top of this page and answered them. I got on my knees and I said the 7th step prayer, as we just went over a few minutes ago. I've got the list of the people that I have harmed in my hand. I'm ready to go into action into step 9. So one of the things we did this time around, as I came through this work, we did sit down, we did review this 8th step list pretty thoroughly. Not only did I rifle through the inventory to make the list, but I also sat silently in prayer for a little while and asked God to show me when I might have missed, even in the end of the 5th step work. If there's something I've missed here, if there's a person that needs to go here, please reveal that to me, because I'm wanting to clean my past. I'm wanting to thoroughly sweep my side of the street. The book says this: we subject ourselves to drastic self-appraisal now, and here's my direction. We go out to our fellows and repair the damage done in the past. We attempt to sweep away the debris that we have accumulated. See, I always thought it was them, or some of them anyway. No, it's me as well. Out of our effort to live on self-will and to run the show ourselves. We've seen a good description of that on pages 60 through 63 as we were studying through that part of the book. But here's my 8th step prayer as outlined in the book. If I haven't the will to do this, and I promise you, I did not have the will to do some of these as I was looking at them, my prayer is this: we ask until it comes. And so I'm very much still in prayer. I mean, God is the center of this deal no matter what. And remember, in other words, this book is telling me, do not forget that it was agreed in the beginning that you would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol, lust, and sexual acting out, in my case. He says probably there are still some misgivings as we look back over the list of business, acquaintance, and friends who we have hurt. And that's what I'm looking at, those I have hurt. We may feel dividend about going to some of them on a spiritual basis. Let us be reassured to some people we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on our first approach. And I can remember trying to do that with a couple of people whenever I went to make amends. I wanted to tell them how spiritual I was and how things were going good in my life and this and that. And then if you would have watched my actions after I told you that in a meeting here, there, or sometime later, it was anything but that. So I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to stick to exactly what this tells me to do. It says we might prejudice them. At the moment, we're trying to put our lives in order, and that's really where we're at this point in the book. We're really wanting to put our lives in order, and this is the way we're going to do it. He says, but this is not an end in itself, our real purpose. And if you've ever wondered what your real purpose is, I know that I did coming here. I didn't really understand, but it gives us a bird's eye view of it right here. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. I run around the meetings for a lot of years saying, You know, my job is to be of maximum service to God and to his people. And I can remember my sponsor stopping me outside of the meeting one night and saying, you don't need to be saying that. The book says that we fit ourselves, and the way that I fit myself is through these steps, and definitely where we're at here in Amends now. He says it's seldom wise to approach an individual who still smarts from our injustice to him and announce that we have gone religious. In the prize ring, this would be called leading with the chin. Why lay ourselves open to be branded fanatics or religious bore? And this is the reason why, is because I may kill a future opportunity to carry a beneficial message. I can't be on both sides of this. I can't hate it and love at the same time. It has to be one or the other. But he says our man is sure to be impressed with the sincere desire to set right the wrong. Now, here's something different that I had not heard, as I said in meetings. I'd heard about making an apology to the people that I'd hurt and making amends, saying that I was sorry. And then I would hear other people say, no, we don't say that we're sorry. We never say that we're sorry in amends. But my book is going to say something quite different, and I'm going to stick to what it's telling me to do here. So here's what it's telling me to do. I'm going to set right the wrong. If I owe you money, I need to pay it. If I have hurt you, I need to make that right. And once I do that, then at that point, there's freedom, there's unity, there's all kinds of good stuff. One of the very first amends that I had to make was to my mother. This is someone who I had treated really bad through the years. I'd beat a man to death, all but to death, whenever I was 16 years old for the way that he had abused me growing up. And I can remember the day that I had beat him, and I mean, he was dead. He was dead. And I remember coming out just in a frantic, screaming and crying. And one of the things that I told her, you've never acted this way whenever he's done that to me for 15 years. I hate you for what you've done. And I made myself a promise that day, 2 promises actually. One is that no man would ever put his hands on me in that way ever again. And the other is I would never trust women as long as I live. Now, I'm not saying that's why I became an alcoholic or a lustaholic, but it played a big part in the way that I treated women for many years to come. And I hated my mother for that. I always made sure that her life was miserable through the years. I can remember going to her and sitting down, and it was very hard. And I said, Mom, I need to talk to you. I realized that I've been wrong in the way that I've been acting, the way that I've treated you all these years. And I just want you to know that I'm here today to ask you what I can do to right this wrong. And I can remember her, beginning to cry. And she told me that she loved me and she hated me seeing the road that I was going down. The people that I'd hurt, not only mentally and spiritually, but most definitely physically. And she told me that she wanted me to continue to stay sober and continue to work the program. And then she laid out a list of other things. And this is a question some days I wish I would have never asked her, because I've ended up in places like antique stores and senior citizens dinners. And I've ended up in all kinds of places with my mother that I would have never thought that I would have gone. But you know what? I bounced the ball to her and asked her what I could do to make this right. It wasn't that she wanted to torture me by taking me to those places. She wanted time with her son. So my mother today has a son. She's not my mother. I am her son. And today our relationship has healed us in a very beautiful way. I've done the same thing with my wife. A little over a year ago, I had to come in and I had to ask her, please tell me, how can I right the wrong that I've done? Because it was horrible what I had done to her. I had exposed her, not only me, but her, in front of the entire fellowship of people that respected us in many different states, began to turn away from us. And she had done absolutely nothing wrong there. One of the things she asked me to do was to walk away from the group that we had founded in 2007. And it was a big book study group. And it was one of the hardest things I ever had to do. But the other was, of course, be faithful to me, be honest, be transparent with me. And that's been a process, not an event. But I tell you that had I just went to her and said, I'm sorry, that wouldn't have been near enough. That may have made me feel a little better, like I was off the hook or whatever. But it's not asking us to do that. It's asking us to sincerely set right the wrong. And there's a way to do that with even those who have passed away. I've had to do that quite a bit. And we'll be looking at that as well as we go through this, because it gives us a way to set right the wrong, make amends with those that are passed away. Thank God for this book and the directions in it. Next sentence says, he's going to be more interested in a demonstration of goodwill than he is in our talk of spiritual discoveries. I often wonder how it would have been if I would have went and I sat down with my mother, my wife, and many other people that I made amends to through the years and said, look, I have found God. Things are different in my life now. I'm following a 12-step program. Everything's wonderful. You know, I really didn't do any of that. I didn't talk about spiritual discoveries. But what has happened is I have showed a demonstration of a different man as time has went on through this. The man that I saw that I was back over on page 60 and 61, that man rears his head from time to time, but not very often anymore. And when he does, I catch him pretty fast in step 10, thank God. You know, people are more interested in a demonstration of our behavior than they ever will be of our talk of spiritual discovery. So this is not a talking program. This is a walking program from what I see. It says we do not use this as an excuse from shying away from the subject of God when it will serve any good purpose. And that's the only time when it will serve any good purpose. We are willing to announce our convictions with tact and common sense. And that's only if necessary. The question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. Look at the word hated. That's a promise for me today. It's not hate, it's hated. As I came through this work, particularly in step 4 with resentments, when I got to the turnarounds, what some people call them 4, I call it the turnaround column, we saw there where we took a look at where we had been wrong. And at that point, we did a lot of prayer work on the top of page 67 before we ever went into writing about our mistakes. When I did that, the hate went away. It did, as I thoroughly did that. So that word hated no longer exists for me. In fact, in my book, the word ED is marked out. It's that's a promise for me, is that it's hated, not hate. But anyway, the question of how to approach that man, and there's another thing as well. Who's going to do the approaching here? Am I going to wait for him to come to me? Am I just going to wait till when this may pop up at some time? Some of these I might, yes, but the book says here the question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. It may be he has done more harm than we have done to him, and though we may have acquired a better attitude toward him, and remember in steps 4 and 5, we really took a close look at that. It says we are still not too keen about admitting our faults. Nevertheless, with the person we dislike, we take a bit in our teeth. And I can remember there was a girl that reported me to the district in Alcoholics Anonymous for my behavior of acting out with one of her sponsees once she found out. She reported me to the district. She spread it all around. Oh, I considered her an enemy. I wanted to kill that woman. I really did. But you know what? I was at fault here, and I knew it. And as I came through this work and I took a good, close look at that, the day came when I had to go to that woman and make amends to her, because I really trash talked her and I really dominated her through the years in the program. I knew the traditions, I knew the concepts, I knew the big book, and I would use that as a club. There was nothing spiritual about that. I was a very sick man inside of the fellowship, using the program as a club. So I had to take a bit in my teeth and go to that woman and make amends to her. Because the next sentence really explains it all for me. It says, it is harder to go to an enemy than a friend. And I considered her an enemy, even though she was a sister. But we find it much more beneficial. What a promise. I can remember the way that amends turned out. We both cried, we both embraced, and we walked away from there different people altogether. It says we go to him. There it is again. We don't wait for him to come to us. We go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit. Now, if I have not done that prayer work on page 67, if I have not moved through that the way it's outlined in this book, if I've not looked at fears, if I have not looked at my conduct, I've not openly admitted that completely with someone else, then the chances of me going to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit is still going to be pretty slim, because I'm probably not going to do that. But my book says here, I go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feelings. So by this time, it should already be gone by the time that I go to him, and expressing my regret. I can remember one guy telling me, I want you to go and I want you to make amends. It was to a particular person. And he said, I don't care how you do it. Just read page 77 and figure out how to do it. And then you go do it. And so I read through here. And when I got to this part that we just read, that we go to him in a helpful, forgiving spirit, confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret, one of the things I did was I went to that man. I sat down and I told him, I said, I just want you to know that I regret everything that I done to you. It's just, it was wrong. And I just need to know what I can do to make it right. So regret is a big part of that. One of the things that my sponsor that brought me through this work this last time, he told me, David, there are going to be some things that you're going to have to live with that you'll probably regret for the rest of your life, that you probably will not ever completely be free of in your consciousness. Now, for the most part, that's not been true. I do live free. One of the things that I regret with all of my heart today is I hurt my wife in such a way that it took her out of the fellowship that she was such a part of, that she had helped so many women into recovery. My wife has over 26 years of recovery, and she is as thorough through this work as I have been. It shamed her to the point that that's been over 13 months now. She's never went back to AA again. Now, she has went back to Al-Anon. She has found her way in there, and she has done some S-Anon work as well. But her major fellowship today is Al-Anon. But that is one of the regrets that I definitely have. So under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. We simply tell him that we will never get over drinking, or in most of our cases, acting out, until we have done our utmost to straighten out the past. And that's what we're here to do. We're here to sweep off our side of the street, realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do. Now, here was a direction that I'd never really looked at too closely before. Never telling him what he should do. Before I came through this work in the big book, and I would go to sit down to make amends, I'd say, I'm sorry, I really wish I would have never done that to you, but when you done this to me, and then I reacted in such a way. No, the book doesn't say any of that. I don't want to veer away from the letter of what this is telling me to do, because if I do, I'm starting to add my stuff into it. And I promise you, for me, that has never worked. So I'm never going to try to tell him what he should do. His faults are not discussed. We stick to our own. And there's a period there. So if my manner is calm, and I find now that whenever I have made amends, this has been my demeanor here. Calm, frank, open. Look at this promise. We will be gratified with the results. If I can go to him in this kind of an attitude, man, what a beautiful, beautiful experience this turns out to be, not only for me, but for him as well. That has been my experience. In 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes the man we're calling upon admits his own faults. So feuds of years stand melting away in an hour. There's a promise. Rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. I have an uncle, and he lives about probably 15 miles from me to the east here. And this was a man that I treated very badly. And I'm sober. I'm sober at this time in the other fellowship. And I got very upset with him with resentment. If I'm not doing this work, and if I'm not staying current in step 10, none of this really matters much anyway. I'm going to fall back to sleep, and I'm going to get pretty sick. And I did. And I treated him really badly. And I'm a big fisherman down here, and I love, to do that. And, of course, with a big ego, you got to have a big boat and all this stuff. But I needed a backer, and this man was my backer. He co-signed a note for me at the bank. And of course, I'm making the money to take care of this. But whenever I ended my last marriage due to lust and sexual acting out, he ended up siding with her, in my view, and rightfully so. I mean, my God, the way I was treating her and the children and everybody else, there's no wonder why he shouldn't do this. But anyway, I got very resentful at him. And I wanted to whip him physically pretty bad, but I never could catch up to him. So I thought, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll just take that boat. And I've got it arranged to where it's in my name now. And I don't owe him a dime. And there's about $4,500 left on that. And I said, you know what? He can pay it off from here. And so I went away with the boat. And in fact, I sold it. And I can remember that I was in some bad shape financially. So I thought, I'll tell you what I'll do. as alcoholics, sexaholics, we always got a plan, and I got a plan. And so I'm going to file bankruptcy. And one of the person that I'm going to put on my bankruptcy is him. And he can never touch me on this again. And he couldn't. I had it fixed to where he couldn't. Guess who came up when I come back through this work with my sponsor, this time taking a close look at that? That man turned up. Now, this had been several years, and we hated each other. In fact, I threatened him on the phone, if you ever show up, I'm going to hurt you physically. And so he stayed away. And but that just really ate on me. The more that I would look at my list, I would see his name. I think, God, oh God. So my mother had an 80th birthday party, and my wife put on a big event for her, and he was there. And I asked him, I said, man, could you come by to where I could talk to you? I said, I'm not going to hurt you. I promise. I just want to talk with you. I'm really sorry about some things that have happened. I'd like to make them right. And he said, okay. Of course, I never seen him again. But as I'm going through this list, I'm starting to get near the end of my amends now, and he's still on there. And so I call him one day, and he doesn't answer. He hangs up on me. So I wait a day, and I call him again. He answers the phone. And before he can talk, I just said, hey, look, I said, I really need to talk with you. I said, I have been wrong in the way that I thought, and I need to make right that wrong. I mean, I took from you money that I should have never done. And I tell you that I don't have that much cash on me today, but I do have some. And if you'll come and talk to me, I'd like to sit down. I'd like to work this out with you. And so I had his attention, and he talked to me for a little bit, and he come back, and I talked him into coming over the next day. He was in town, and he came by, and you could tell he was very nervous in coming up, and I'm expecting, this big confrontation. This little bitty man in overalls jumps out of the truck, and I'm thinking, God, I hadn't seen him in years. In my heart, I just felt bad. I just felt bad for the way I treated him. And I asked him in. We had a cup of coffee together, and I sat down, and I asked him, why I called you here. And I just need to ask you, how can I right this wrong? But not only that, I need you to know sincerely that I apologize to you with all of my heart for what I done to you back then. Now, people in meetings and people that I've heard a lot tell me, you never say that you're sorry in these amends. That's not true, according to my book. So I did that, and I gave him an amount of money that day. We sat and we talked for a long time. And I asked him, could I make a deal with him to pay that money back to him, and that I would have to do it month by month. But if he was open to that I was more than willing to do it, and I would not miss no matter what. That day that man left my house, what we read there just a couple of minutes ago absolutely came true in my life that day. So feuds of years stand melting away in an hour. And it may have been an hour, it may have been a little more, but it wasn't much. Rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. And that's what happened that day. He left that day. I owed him a great deal of money. I wrote him a check the other day and sent it away, and the balance on that account is $400. I'll have him paid off within just pretty quick now. And man, what a beautiful experience that has turned out to be. Now, we're not fishing buddies anymore, and we don't hug every time we see each other, this or that. But you know what? There's a bond there now, and I feel it within my heart. I'm okay with this man, and I'm so grateful because he's family. I love him. He's getting in his older years now. And he told me, he said, David, whenever that money came, I tell you, I was in a place where I needed it so bad. Thank you. Thank you for doing that. I said, I've got a bunch of your stuff out here in my shop that I've held on to for all of these years. I want to give that all back to you. And as we was putting those things in his truck, he was saying, God, I forgot about this. I forgot about that. Wow, I hadn't seen this in a long time. And, tears are running down my face, and it's just killing me the way that I've treated people out of my selfish and self-centered behavior as an alcoholic, sexaholic. Let's read a little bit more, and I'll close it off. It says, our former enemies sometimes praise what we are doing and wish us well. That doesn't matter to me. I mean, I'm glad for that experience if it comes, but I don't want my ego in any part of this today. And I have to be real careful right there, because I'll get to expecting that, and I don't need to at all. Occasionally, they will offer assistance. It should not matter. However, someone does throw us out of his office, and I've had this experience as well. I've had people to tell me to leave. I had one man that would not accept my amends. I was pretty upset that my sponsor that brought me through this work made me go back and approach him more than one time. And as we look into the directions here shortly, it will tell us that it's necessary to do that. I'd read over that part of it too. But anyway, it says occasionally they'll offer assistance. It shouldn't matter. It says we have made our demonstration And I think that's the key, the demonstration. It's water over the dam. So let's take a quick look at the financial amends as outlined in the big book, and then I'll close it off for today. Most alcoholics, sexaholics, owe money. I don't know about you, but I owe money when I got here. And a lot of it, I run my family in the dirt. I made a lot of money in my life, and I spent a lot of money in my life on lust and acting out and things that I wanted to do with escorts and this and that. And so I came here owing quite a bit of money, actually. It says we do not dodge our creditors. That's a direction for me right there, that I'm not going to dodge them. I'm not going to let fear dominate me to the point where I'm going to stay away from these people, because I'm liable to act out again or drink if I do. It says, telling them what we are trying to do, we make no bones about our drinking or our acting out, whatever the case is. They usually know it anyway, and they did, whether we think so or not. Nor are we afraid of disclosing our alcoholism or our sexaholism on the theory that it may cause financial harm. Now, the only person I was ever worried about that causing financial harm to was me. And my ego was always in the middle of this. So I want to follow these directions very carefully. If I don't, my ego is going to jump in here. And that's why I need a sponsor to really help me through that. Look at what it says, approached in this way. And remember who's going to do the approaching. It's going to be us. The most ruthless creditor will sometimes surprise us. But here's what happened with my uncle, and here's what's happened with so many more people through the years. Arranging the best deal we can. And that's what I did that day. I arranged the best deal that I could with that man. And I've done that with every other person that I had financial amends to. I just arranged the best deal I could. And I didn't tell them I'm going to pay you off in 2 months no matter what. I'm going to let my family suffer, do this, do that. I didn't do any of that. I made the best deal that I could do. But look at this sentence, or toward the end of the rest of this sentence. We can let these people know we are sorry. So people running around in the fellowship telling us that we are never to say that we are sorry in our amends, this book says something quite different right here. And you can bet that day I let that little man know from the bottom of my heart how sorry I was for taking advantage of him, threatening him, scaring him for that many years, and taking that money from him, withholding it when I had plenty of money at that time to pay him in full rather than having to pay month by month. Yes, I think we definitely owe a sincere apology to a whole lot of people. Our drinking or our acting out has made us slow to pay. We must, and this is very important for me right here. And when I see must in this book, it's something for me to pay attention to. We must lose our fear of creditors, no matter how far down we have to go, for we are liable to drink or we are liable to act out if we are afraid to face them. And that's a promise in this book. From not all the promises are good. So there's work to be done here. And I'm going to be the one to do it. I'm going to do this with the help of a loving God at this point. And I'm definitely going to do it with a sponsor who has been through this work as outlined in the book. Now, I told you earlier that I still had one amends that I had not made. I padded the expense account for about $3,000 to $5,000, maybe more. I don't know. I took a lot of money from these people. This has turned up every time that I have done this work, or every time that I've attempted these steps before I've done this work letter by letter. It's always showed up. I've never had the willingness to do that. I've prayed about it. One of the reasons that I haven't is because there may be a chance that I go to jail over this for a long time. I don't know. I just don't know. I talked to a man not too long ago, and I shared that with him, another man that has been through this work. And, he gave me some ideas that I could do, that would. But one of the things that has me torn the most about it, and it's something that I continue to pray about, write about, and talk to my sponsor about quite often, and I don't want to jump ahead too far, but right there on page 79 before I close it up, it says this. First full paragraph, although these reparations take innumerable forms, there are some general principles which we find guiding. Reminding ourselves that we have decided to go to any lengths to find a spiritual experience. Here's my prayer. I ask that I be given strength and direction to do the right thing no matter what the personal consequences. This is the part that has me thrown with that last amends. We may lose our position, our reputation, or face jail, but we are willing. We have to be. We must not shrink at anything. So I know the day is coming when that amends is going to be made, whether it's one way or the other. It has to be made. It's the only thing left. And when I came back this time into SA, the one thing that I did find coming back through this work, there were so many amends that were left undone. I never practiced step 10 and 11 to the best of my ability as outlined in the book. I couldn't. I just couldn't. I can't enter the world of the spirit when I've got all this going on. I'm running around in the dark and I'm sick and I'm acting out with lust and all kinds of other things. I'm lying. I'm dishonest. I'm all of these things. It's only by God's grace I didn't drink again through that time. And, but I'll forever be grateful because you folks brought me in. You listened to me. You've come here for 17 weeks listening to this. So I'm just so grateful for you. And my life is in such a better place than it ever was. I'm coming up on 14 months now over here, and it's just been a beautiful experience. My wife asked me yesterday, I shared at Gratitude. I was the lead off at Gratitude Day yesterday on Step 10, and she asked if she could come in and sit. Man, I tell you, that was, and I didn't really know at first, but I said, yeah, it's an open meeting, and it's co-ed, so I'm sure that you're welcome to come in and sit. She brought her big book. She's not had her big book out in a year, and beautiful, beautiful. What ended up happening was I went through step 10 as I do it today, outlined in the big book, exactly what it says. And she knows I do this because she's watched me. And it turned out to be a very beautiful experience. She said, I can tell, I can see it all along. But what I hear, the way that you described it in the book, the way you do it today is beautiful. And I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share that with me a little more in depth. And that's something I haven't been asked by her in a long, long time. There's healing here. There's forgiveness. And without this step, it's not going to happen because I'm going to continue to mentally move backwards. My spiritual experience is going to begin to disappear. And I'm going to get sick again. And I may not act out for a long time. But I'm going to start lying. I'm going to start being dishonest in my affairs. I'm going to start bullying. I'm going to start doing all those things that I do so well. And the day is going to come when the temptation is going to be there and I can't overcome it because I got too much pride to reach out to somebody and say, look, I'm struggling. And I'm going to act out again. And that's been my experience over and over. But today, as a result of doing this, I'm not only sober, I've recovered. And man, I am so grateful. Now, does that mean? Now, when I say recovered, I don't want to scare anybody into thinking that, he's talking about being cured. I'm not saying that at all. There's a difference between being recovered from a hopeless state of mind and being cured of alcoholism or sexholism. Big difference. So I'm not saying cured at all, but I am saying we do recover here. But without this work, we do not. So I have found a good group of men that I stick very close to today. I'm transparent with those people. I've met a lot of you sisters on this call. I have the utmost respect for you. I love you. And I just pray for our recovery every day. So thank you again for letting me come out this week to share. I'm looking forward to moving into the rest of the amends next week. And just really glad to be here, Dennis. Thank you for your service, brother.